The Brutally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Starving Artist Brewing. Starving Artist Brewing may be a small speck on Michigan's beer map, but they say big things come in small packages. A brewery who really puts their money where their mouth is, supporting underground artists far and wide. Making delicious beers with the simple belief that you should judge beer, not people. Brutally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BRUTALLY and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard. And you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give
up. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Brutally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Torsten from God is an Astronaut. And this is a really fun chat, and I kind of want to preface the chat by talking a little bit about something that I find interesting and is ultimately what led to me wanting to have this conversation. For those that you may not know, the band put out their first record 20 years ago, and now here we are in 2022, and the band put out the beginning of the end, a live 20-year anniversary re-recording of their first record. And why that's interesting when I think about it is because, a lot of bands change over the years. Some to the detriment of their fan base, which is, whatever at this point. That's not what I want to talk about. But it's the fact that, sometimes the old saying is we have a lifetime to put out the first something. And, then the eyes and expectations are on you as a band for the next record. And that can either be the sophomore slump or it can be, what continues on your path to success in the industry. And what's interesting about it is if you've ever followed a band from kind of the beginning of their careers to wherever they are in it currently, sometimes you'll hear songs and they'll kind of replay around with the songs. The melody may be the same, but maybe they'll kind of change some stuff around. And it just keeps it interesting and exciting for the band, and especially if they kind of play it in a certain order. And thinking about going back through and changing and re-recording, especially live, your first record, it's incredible. It's an incredible undertaking, and one that, I think the God is an Astronaut guys really knocked out of the park, maintaining it to be its original sound, but kind of updating it and making it sound like the rest of their catalog. And, too often I think we think about that and we put it on musicians like, why would you touch a classic? Like if Slipknot were to come out with a re-recorded version of their first record or Iowa, you would be like, you can't mess with it. You can't fuck with something that already exists and is a classic in its own right. But I kind of would ask, why not? It's not ours. It's theirs. It's their art. It's their creation. Why can't they do with it as they see fit? Now, we as fans can argue that it's not as good as the original or it doesn't resonate with us anymore. I mean, look at In Flames. A lot of people are complaining about that. But I ultimately just kind of feel like it was never ours. So why and who are we to say that they can't do this? But ultimately, the other thing I've been thinking about when I saw that email was thinking about how we as people are not the same people. We change all the time. We're constantly evolving. We're taking pieces of ourselves that make us feel comfortable, that make us feel who we are best represented when we go out. So why do we not extend that same lens to bands? And I understand nostalgia is a heavily steeped thing here that we're discussing, but ultimately it's interesting that as people, we're fine with people changing. We actually encourage change. Almost in everything, we encourage change. But in music, we want it to be exactly how it was. In art, I guess I'll even extend it to that. Movies are the same way. Our entertainment, we never want it changed. We never want it messed with. We want it preserved exactly how it was when we were first heard of it, whatever, because it's so steeped in nostalgia. But it's the only thing I feel like that we want like that. Everything else we want updated. We want the new. If there's a video game, well, I want the new one. If there's a new TV, well, I need the new one. New car? Yes, all the updates, please. No one is clamoring for a 2023 car with a fucking like 8-track player in it. No. Like, if it doesn't have an aux cord, I better not have an aux cord. Better have Bluetooth. Like, literally throughout everything else in our life, we want better and new and improved, except for all the things that we take in as entertainment. That, please keep it exactly how it was. And I find that very interesting. So, of course, I wanted to have a conversation with Torsten, kind of going down nostalgic and memory lane and the processes there within of recreating this new record. So, with all that said, let's get into my conversation, and I'll talk to you on the other side of it. So I mean, this is really just kind of a conversation more than like a traditional interview kind of thing. It's always funny. Lately, I've been finding out that publicists will describe the show and it's like beer show, talks about music, and you're like, sort of. But it's made me realize how hard it might be for bands to kind of traverse through, touring or whatever, where you're constantly like, well, this is what they are or whatever. And you're like, well, we kind of are, but not really either. So it's kind of interesting to arrive at this point where you're realizing that things aren't the way they are, despite of all the work you put in. I mean, here we are 20 years removed from, your first record. What was it like kind of going back and revisiting where it all began?
It was kind of nostalgic. That's probably the first thing I'd say about it. It was, I think when we began, we were kind of more an electronic group, which was myself and Neil sitting in the studio, kind of making electronic kind of music. And so I think obviously we played live, we covered to the live concerts and stuff like that. We kind of shaped the sound of All's Violent from playing the first album live. So going back in time was kind of like, it was almost as if for those 3 months that we were kind of rehearsing it, it was almost as if we were right back at the beginning of our career with no other material. This is all you had to your identity. And it was actually strangely refreshing because we just realized how different what we're doing today from what we were doing back then, but yet trying to play it with this similar instrumentation that we're using today. And I think it turned out really, really well. There's a couple of songs that we've been playing throughout the years, which were really easy to obviously do, like From Dusk to the Beyond and The End of the Beginning and a few songs like that. But songs like Lost Symphony were, we never actually played that as a band live. It was actually written back in 1998 with an electronic project. And we had just thrown it on to the first album because we were kind of short. So to go back and play some kind of like electronic and almost kind of like funk grooves and stuff like that was really kind of interesting. So yeah, it was definitely nostalgic and surreal at the same time to go all the way back to the start.
Well, like, what's interesting kind of too is I feel like, the old saying, you have a lifetime to make your first record. The second one, there's a little bit more pressure because people now know what they're expecting out of you. But what's also interesting about it too is, from your perspective, I would imagine going back to where you were mentally, maybe thinking about where you all were when you started writing this material versus where you all are now in your lives 20 years later. Did some of the material, did it change for you at all?
The first thing I'd say, it did take me back to the time when we were, writing that material. I remember one distinct one, which was we were watching the Mothman Prophecies, and after that we wrote Point Pleasant, and So we were unemployed. We were, we were kind of in between jobs. We were kind of doing like wood floors and carpets for my father and our, when we didn't have enough money to buy gear or look after ourselves. So the idea is this was going to be our farewell record, and it wasn't going to be a music career. We tried before that, like probably a lot of bands, where you're trying to write music to see if you can get a record deal. This was kind of before the internet really took off, and we were still kind of saying to ourselves, can we just at least write one thing before we give up that we actually liked, rather than writing something for somebody else? So we were in that kind of mindset, and it just kind of, I don't want to say we had chips on the shoulders, but we were kind of like, shit, this isn't probably going to work out for us, this music thing. And we were really kind of in that frame of mind, and it was kind of a little darkness and kind of an apocalyptic vibe to the record. But yeah, it did take me right back to that kind of mindset of, and it kind of made me feel, in one way, kind of how far we've come from where we started, and the fact that we were still 20 years later. Because when we wrote that album, I can assure you, we did not think we'd be around even a year later, never mind 20 years later. we were full sure that was it. And it takes the smallest thing just to keep going. That first record wasn't really noticed too much, but it did get a little bit of traction inside our own country and a little bit outside it. And a lot of people don't know this, our first two records were really written at the same time. And Beginning and All's Bind were written pretty much simultaneously. I'd say half of the songs that were on All's Bind were literally finished writing wise during the first album, but there was too many piano tracks, so we wanted to cut the next one. So I do think what was interesting was, obviously we had slightly better recording equipment for All Is Wild and All's Bright. So in one way now we had kind of had the idea, what would the first album have turned out like had we had a computer and be able to record band performances rather than just using samples and loops. So in one way, I think it's nice to be finally able to see what it would have sounded like. But yeah, I guess I to me, looking back, we're different now because we're not in the same situation, because we can do music for a living, and I'm very, very grateful to be in that position. But yeah, I think it's just reminded me how, first of all, lucky we were to even kind of make any dent in the music industry. And it takes obviously a lot of hard work and talent, but that goes without saying. It doesn't. There's so many bands out there that that have worked really hard, write really, really good music, and never get noticed whatsoever. And I know there's some people out there will say Cream always rises to the top. It doesn't. I know there's a lot of bands even that I've recorded and worked with here in Ireland. They just don't have the money to sustain themselves over a long period of time. So I think we definitely got lucky, for sure.
I mean, I think there's a couple of things in there that are pretty interesting to think about. I mean, I'm of the age that I remember pre-internet world. And to think about how like anyone would have been able to get their music out is really interesting to kind of just think about. Distribution was really limited to if you were on a label, if you could find someone that believed in what you were doing and then, decided to help you financially, whatever, get your music out there. It's interesting to think about how separated the world was versus how connected it is now. And I think when I was listening back to the re-release and then subsequently the rest of the material, it's interesting to remember a time where like imported CDs were huge and they were so fucking expensive.
Yeah, for sure.
And that you really had to be a fan of something, and there really was an investment in the bands that you loved that weren't from the US or readily available. You felt like more of a connection, like they were yours, because you had to seek out music back then. You had to seek out something that you thought was worth it. And it's interesting because I've been kind of talking recently about how, artists, with the DSPs now of, iTunes and Spotify and all that kind of stuff, that some people are like, the musicians are getting screwed and all this kind of stuff. And it's interesting to kind of remember a time where I think fans valued things more because you had to spend your hard-earned money. You had to go to a store. You had to wait, especially if you're getting imports. But I've never really thought about it from the music side of someone that was overseas, like to think about, potentially you're doing everything in-house or pretty in-house, that it's like, oh my God, we're sending a CD to somewhere in the United States, or we're sending a CD here, and someone had to find us and hope that we're not going to rip them off. Like, did any of that kind of come back to you at all? Like thinking about the firsts associated with this album?
Yeah, I mean, it's, at the very, very beginning, I remember the internet had basically just given us a means to, I suppose, spread the word about the band, but we were still posting all CDs to the States and everywhere. And it was, Neil's, my brother, probably would have done a lot of that kind of work, more the kind of like promotion and posting off CDs and stuff. Yeah, we can remember definitely at the start, always going down to the post office after every weekend and posting a bunch of CDs around the world, and it was always really gratifying, to package that stuff and wonder how somebody in Arizona or somebody got to hear about our music, and just keep doing that. And we always sent our music to college radio in the US at the very, very beginning as well. We just got a list from some kind of industry book and just sent them all off, never expecting anything really to happen, but we knew something was happening when this site called Last FM came up, and we had like 500,000 scrobbles or whatever way they called it, people listening to our stuff. And so we knew, somebody obviously was listening to the stuff that we were sending out there at the time. But you're right, it was a very, very different time, in the 90s, for example, before the internet, because you were definitely relying on distributors and record companies and publishers, all that stuff. You couldn't just do anything completely on your own, unless of course you had some kind of underground punk kind of magazine stuff or whatever way that kind of stuff, that scene worked. But we always tried to get a record deal at the start or a distribution deal, and it was next to impossible to get a distribution deal. Even in Ireland, they were kind of saying, sorry, Golden Discs or whatever is the name of one of the record shops here is not going to take your record. Britney Spears is bringing out a record. There's no room for your record on the shelf. So the internet definitely was something that we were really interested in when it came out, because now we can just put whatever we want, and we can kind of bypass these guys, bypass the publishers, bypass A&R men and distribution companies. And we used to use this site called, I think it was called CC Now, which was like a credit card clearing company at the time, and just post our CDs and stuff like that out. Without the internet, I don't think we'd be here. So, and I understand people's problem with Spotify and, with the lack of money and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, a lot of bands have to realize it's probably better now than it was in the 90s, because literally you're waiting for some guy to come back to you to allow you to have a career. Where today, I'm not saying the money's that great, but you still have a chance of getting your music out there and letting hopefully people decide whether they like your music or not. Because in the 90s, you didn't get that choice at all. It was literally left to some guy, whether you get the gigs, whether you get anything. It's literally they can decide whether you're allowed in the club. And nobody ever let us in the club, to be honest. And we tried for years in the 90s, but really hard.
It's kind of interesting to think about, though. Like, I kind of would like to see what bands would have actually learned to make it with the same work ethic that they had then, but with the tools of now. Like, I feel like there's so many great bands that, unfortunately, either due to geographical location of where they were, or just wrong place, wrong time. It'd be interesting to kind of revision history, some things, and be like, let's bring you into kind of now and see if you'd actually have a fair shake at things. Because I don't know, it's just kind of like you said earlier, like, the cream doesn't always rise to the top. And I think that quote, because so many people associate it with success, and it is one of those things that when you think of those things, that it becomes one of those where I think of all the what ifs of the world. And I know that's something I don't try to do anymore, because I definitely know that's an infinite possibilities of things, and it's not centered in real world. But yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. I think it's just because I literally turned 38, and we've been talking, a lot of my friends and I have been talking about how the world has changed, and how is the internet are we better off because it exists, or are we worse off because it exists? And I honestly don't know, because I constantly come back to a lot of the great things it's done, and I think of a lot of the terrible things that it's done.
Sure, yeah.
And I think like another interesting thing is thinking about, you know, gear. Like you kind of talked about the gear, like how you have better technology now to record with. But I also wonder, when you went to do this, did you have any instances of where maybe some of the technology you had when you recorded, like the samples you made and the things like that, it took a little bit to either have to figure out how to convert that technology to something that you could use now, or having to figure out how to remake something because you don't have the technology that you had back then to use now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the technology, was a lot more harder to use, I say, at the beginning, because I remember one of our first purchases was a sampler, and we didn't even know what it was. And it's not like you could go on to the internet, because there was really very little information at that point. You had to kind of read the manual and figure things out what it was. There was obviously really good equipment, at that point, but way beyond the reach of musicians at our level. You're talking about like Neve consoles and solid state Logic desks and the high end tube compressors and all that kind of stuff, and your reel to reels and all that stuff. That was way beyond our budget, and at the same time, most bands couldn't afford to record in studios that had that equipment either. I mean, one of the interesting things that you said there was that what bands did get lost and who would do better today. I can tell you one, just even here in Ireland, was a band called Roller Skate Skinny, who I believe if they did release their music through the internet age, would have a massive cult following. And again, you have to understand, record companies are always trying to find the next big thing. They're not looking for the next underground thing. And I think a lot of music got lost, especially underground music got lost. And but I think recording wise, it's a lot more affordable today to use equipment, a lot more affordable. You've got, programs that can do plugins that, really are truly amazing stuff. And not saying they're as good as some of the hardware, but they're so damn good that I think most people probably couldn't tell the difference at this point between the two. And it's definitely easier today to learn stuff. There's so many cool, amazing YouTube tutorials for people using the plugins and the tools, what equipment to get. There's so much advice, there's so much help. So there's a lot more people, I imagine, doing home recording today than there was when we were doing it. When we were doing it, it was literally like, you really should probably go to a professional to do this. So we were taking huge risks even trying to do our own recordings at that point. And we were mixed results. I think overall they weren't that bad. The first album was probably a little bit cruder than obviously what you'd expect it from any group starting off today in this kind of genre. But you have to remember, all we had was, I still have it there, is this keyboard here. This keyboard here, this the Roland XP80, and my Akai sampler, which is still there. So I kept all my equipment for the simple reason that in case I had to ever go back. And that was the thing, and I probably sold one or two things, like which I wish I didn't, was like a Boss SE70 rack that I had. But with all the plugins today and all the different tools I have, I probably made it a bit better anyway if I had to go recreate those sounds. And that's essentially what I had to do, because we have to resample some of the sounds for our keyboard player Jamie to play live, like the end beginning synthesizer, which was the Korg Entry 6.4, gone through. I think we went through a Marshall amp or something with it at the time. So I was able to sample all that stuff and get it really close to what it was. But I kind of like old equipment, and I still have some of my equipment from the 90s here, like Mutronics, mutators, and all old filter banks. And they're all become like gold dust now. That gear is kind of, you can't really buy them too easy anymore. And bar maybe Reverb or eBay, you might be able to pick something up. But I do kind of like, I like older equipment, and I kind of tend to, I'm one of those guys that never gets rid of it, and really, so I kind of keep it all. It's easy enough for me to kind of keep those sounds. I suppose recording wise, it's definitely a lot easier for bands today than it certainly was back then.
It's definitely easier, and I feel like even from the live, I feel like playing live is easier because now instead of like a band like yourself that might have to fly to the States and rent gear, or because it's going to be so much more expensive to bring all your own stuff, the Kempers and the Profilers and so forth, you know, it's just like you bring that, there's all your tones. And so it's like I understand why those exist and enjoy those a lot more, because it's not nearly as cumbersome, more to the point, it's not nearly as expensive when you're budgeting out tour budgets and so forth. But the interesting thing too is I feel like to a degree it's kind of made people lose their own sound, like something that makes them sound uniquely like themselves, their own kind of digital footprint of sorts. And I know, you know, obviously being a musician myself, it's like tone is in your name there. It's a feeling. It's you know, I can play through, you know, your orange half stack back there, and I'm not going to sound like you. I'll sound like me. Just like if you were to come and play my stuff, you'll still sound like you because it's you that's the sound. But I feel like, and I kind of came across this in the last couple of years when I kind of put together my own little bit of stuff, and I was at a crossroads of like, do I go digital where I can plug it into my computer and I have more ways to play around with stuff and it's easier to get tones, or do I really try to go the old school route and kind of start dialing in tones I like and do it myself and kind of create my own? And at times I wish I would have gone with the Kemper or something where it's like a lot of these tones I know I like and are tried and true and sound great. I totally get to the point where I'm like, really wish I would have bought one of those because it's just easier. But then sometimes when you get to that point where you're like, man, this is just a crushing distorted tone, or this clean tone with this pedal is so sweet. Like I found the sweet spot. It's like, I think there's a little bit more of a reward because you stuck it out and you did it. And I don't think kids, I hate to say it like this, I don't think kids nowadays kind of come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, obviously we've changed back from Axe Effects back to amps, you know, during that whole COVID break. And I used Axe Effects for a long time. And my conclusion is I didn't really like the whole vibe of it at all. There's a couple of problems with it. A couple of advantages, of course. Flying in, you have your tone in the box. It's ready to go, you know. If you have a sound engineer that, you know, knows what, you know, that you work with, it's going to be pretty easy to get a sound through the PA system with the Axe Effects and all that kind of stuff. But everything does sound the same. That was one of the things that I noticed. You know, you can hear Axe Effects. It's amazing. And the same with Kemper and all. And, you know, they're all kind of similar to each other, I guess. But one of the biggest problems I have with it live is you go to watch a band and you're standing at the front of the stage. And I mean, the sound engineers love it because there's no noise pollution. They can put the guitar right through the PA. Makes perfect sense to them. But I'm feeling like I'm playing air guitar because there's nothing coming from me. You know, I have maybe a little matrix cat, but they're so quiet. I mean, you get more volume out of a 15-watt amplifier. It's really, really quiet. The drum kit's monster loud. Kids are right at the front of the stage, and it's like your sound is coming past them through the PA system. And there's like a drum set's blasting at them, and yet there's nothing coming from you. And I just couldn't sell it right. If I hit the guitar, it felt like they're not even reacting to me because the sound has kind of gone past them into the middle of the room, whatever way the PA system was positioned. We tried wedges on the stage that kind of helped a little bit, you know, pointing at the crowd. But after a while, I just said to myself, there's one word that's, you know, a lot of house engineers, sound engineers kind of forget: vibe. It's still a really big, important part of most music. Definitely anything in the, you know, the rock region of music needs a certain amount of level to come from the stage and from that person. You know, for example, if I'm standing on the left side of the stage, I obviously want to hear what that player is playing. And I don't like the idea of the sound is just perfectly mixed and balanced in a PA system with a big loud drum set at the front. So that, and it kind of always felt like karaoke to me in a weird way. Amazing sounds, of course, and you can put your in-ears in and it's fantastic guitar tone. But it just didn't work for me. And there was a few, I'm not going to mention the bands, but there were some really respectable bands. And we'd be playing with them and they'd be using Kempers or whatever. And it's the same thing. I say, this is terrible. And you go back to the middle of the room and to the back of the room, or if it's a big, huge festival, it's fine in those situations. Because you're so far away from the stage anyway. It made no real difference in those situations. But in smaller clubs, I think it was the Kiss of Death, it's literally no vibe from it. I actually wished we never went to Axe Effects and stuff like that. I see its place, and I can understand. I think it would work for maybe a pop band where your kids are not looking for a kind of a hit off the stage. They're just looking for the singer to kind of do its thing. But not for rock music. I think it's terrible. And I see a lot of groups, metal bands especially, using that technology. And we played at a festival recently. I think we were the only band. We were probably the only band that had amplifiers, and you could tell the difference. And some of those bands were absolutely, musicianship wise, at that festival are through the roof. Like, I'm talking about really, really good. But it's just not believable because there's nothing coming off the stage. And I think that really hurts a lot of bands more than they actually would care to realize. Of course, there is the one downside that the sound engineers will tell you. You're in a small club and all you can hear is your amps blasting off the stage. That's a problem. One easy way is just turn the cab sideways in a situation like that. You know, you still get something off the stage. Turning it backwards is a no-no for me, because then there's nothing happening. You know, it's just to the wall. But the other thing as well, and you touched on it there as well, there's just no experimentation of sound. I mean, like, my sound now is essentially pedals that stack into each other, and I've experimented with the with which pedals I want where, putting a delay pedal before the distortion and having one after, two totally different sounds. Then one of my main sounds is like a Friedman BEO, a deluxe pedal into a big muff, into another pedal, to get me that big wall of sound. And I can keep stacking it, and to get this massive wall of sound. As long as I have a 100 watt tube amp, I can get it done that way. With Axe Effects, you can't really do it. It kind of does, but it's not the same thing. It just feels quite brittle to me, and it doesn't feel real. And I like the idea of also experimenting with different microphones, where it's an SM57 or if it's a Royer 121, and combining them, get your own sounds. I find that much more interesting, and I don't mind if it is more raw than an Axe Effects or a Kemper. I just think people go to a concert, they want to hear something real. They don't want to hear a CD up loud, and that's my kind of experience on it anyway.
Well, it's funny because, like, you touched on something I just literally experienced. What is today? Today's Monday morning, so Saturday night, going to see Bring Me the Horizon. Excuse me. And they're kind of an interesting group in the fact that they're still kind of a rock band. They started as a really heavy metal band, and now have a lot of like electronic and more pop elements to them. And their stage show is like, there's no cabs on stage, there's no wedges, there's no nothing. And I got pretty close where I was between the two big PA things. I could barely hear the vocals. The drums were really the only thing I knew, or that I could pick out. Thankfully, because I listened to music so much, like, I'm not probably like, and I could literally hear the kids. Like, it wasn't until kind of there was the thing that they knew, or the words on the back of the screen, where all of a sudden now everyone's kind of locked in with what they're hearing or what the show is. Because you'd hear a lot of like the part they knew, and it's like, I kind of laugh because I'm like, I guess I know I'm older and I listen to music a lot differently than I think a lot of other people do, because I was able to know right where we were in the song because I know what the drums are doing. And so it was interesting to me to even think about that, like, where I'm like, I am able to follow along, but it's so crazy because there would have been a day where, like, the drums are sideways, so like they're kind of pushing this way, so you're getting more of the cymbals and the snare and the sound movement and all that, and we're in an outdoor venue. But there would have been a day where there would have been wedge monitors with unique sounds for each person who was in front of them. The cabs would have been facing us. The drummer would have been traditionally right in the middle. So everything's kind of coming at you literally as the band's playing it, but then you're also getting the different sounds depending on where you are on the stage of the individual's wedge like their monitor mix. And again, this is all something I'm thinking about while I'm watching a band. And I was like, man, I almost kind of prefer those days, because I was like, man, there's a lot of tone deaf people around me who don't know how to sing, don't know how any of these songs apparently really go. And I kind of miss those days where I felt like I was more connected to the music. I was more connected to what was happening because you were just so immersed in it. And I feel like, I don't want to say it was, I mean, it was definitely more raw, but I feel like it was more invasive to be interactive from the crowd to the fans. I don't know. Like, again, maybe it's just because I'm getting older and I remember when things changed, but it's like, I do enjoy the fact that now bands can go out and sound really good and they don't have to deal with as many issues as you would if like a tube went out or something's wrong with your patch cables or something. But it's also a lot more sterile now.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. One of the problems, obviously, for younger bands, bringing orange heads and Marshall heads or and cab 4x12s, they probably don't have the transport or the money to be able to bring that kind of equipment. So I can see, I certainly wouldn't want anybody taking the wrong thing from me. If you got to use that gear, then you got to use that gear. But unfortunately, the side effect, it is sterile and it does make everything sound the same. And while that technology is improving, it is getting better, but it's kind of perfecting it more and not really giving you anything more real. And that's what I don't like about that stuff. We played with Bring Me the Horizon in Romania at a festival, and I think their target audience has changed from where they began. I think they began in little small clubs in the UK in front of a very dedicated young heavy metal kind of crowd that would have really liked the aggression and the amplifiers blasting. And I think now they kind of changed their target audience much more to a mainstream crowd that are not really interested in Marshall amps or pedals or anything like that. Yeah, the one thing I noticed the minute they were there, the lighting truck was the majority of the equipment literally been brought out, and I don't take anything away. Look, it's completely different than what we do. So at this point, they're targeting what I would more or less like a Linkin Park kind of audience. I would say, from what I can see. It's still really talented guys at the same time. Wouldn't be personally my cup of tea at this point, at this stage of my life, but. Yeah, I mean, I think there was like two Marshall heads back there, and gone into a kind of like a radio, kind of what would you call those boxes? That kind of maybe a cab simulator box or something to that effect, and the triggers on the drum set. So, I mean, we had more gear, and there was a band, as far as backline, and the Steel or the other band that we played with were the exact opposite. It was literally the ancient organs and Hammond organs been brought on. But hey, at the end of the day, the crowd loved them. The pyrotechnics were out in full force, and the crowd absolutely loved that. So and you can't argue with the success that band has achieved. I think that their merchandise is through the roof. So, but yeah, again for them, they're aiming at a stadium audience, stadium crowd, and it's probably a lot easier than trying to find the mic position and. It gives them more time to set up the lighting and presentation, I guess. I don't want to be in a band like that. I'm kind of happy to kind of keep it real at this point, and I'm not really interested in. Lights are important, but I don't want them there to compensate for anything. I'd rather, if I had no lights, I'd still like to think that we could entertain an audience. So that would be the way I look at it.
It's kind of interesting too. The other day, listening back to a lot of the catalog, and something I've been trying to do a little bit more of and be mindful of is to do more meditation. And for me, I know the point of meditation is to kind of find the focus, find the center of whatever, and just kind of be in it and kind of be whole, for lack of a better term. I'm, like I said, still trying to figure it all out, but I find for me the way that I'm able to get there and get into that headspace where I kind of lose sight of and lose consciousness of like everything around me and focus is actually to have some kind of music, like softer kind of music going. And it was, right before we did this, I went and took my dog for a walk this morning, and it was still kind of dark out, and just had it through the headphones I'm wearing, which are noise canceling as well. So you're really able to just kind of be immersed in it. And it's even to the point where if you like kind of turn your head a little bit, like you hear the sound move with you. I think I forget what they call it now. I don't know if it's like something like 360 immersive sound or something like that. I know different music is starting to do that. But it's really kind of interesting because there were times where I felt, I could feel my body kind of naturally getting calm, my breathing kind of getting to a slower pace, and just kind of getting into that kind of trance-like state of meditation. And it kind of made me wonder, is that something you, I guess personally, since I'm talking to you, is that something that maybe you guys all do, or is it something that you've had people tell you happens as a result of listening to your music? Like people kind of are able to get centered and kind of find a happy place to kind of go to.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, we've had plenty of people come to us and saying that our music has really helped them get through things, and it helps them focus on even things as homework and different things like that. And it's funny because we're bringing out it's an ambient compilation with a few remixes that's coming out in about 2 weeks' time called Somnia, which is literally just for that kind of purpose. I remixed about 10 tracks, I think, and for that. For me personally, no music is kind of how I meditate. I usually, before this interview, I went on a kind of 7-kilometer run, and just through the forest, and I just my own thoughts. Music kind of, it starts to make me analyze things in a way as kind of a side effect to making music. You start to listening to, the sonic qualities of what bass they could have pushed or mid they could have pushed, or then if you hear something really good, it's shit, I wish I wrote that one, so it kind of I can't actually relax with music, so I tend to just literally just silence, just run. Sometimes I do put in noise cancelling headphones, but with no music, so I can just hear my own breathing. And so I'm kind of funny that way with music. I kind of get, maybe films probably be more my thing for kind of relaxing too. But I do kind of, as I do understand that whole ambient thing, and we've had some ambient songs that we've made in the past, and I definitely would urge people to check out our Somnia release that's coming very, very soon. And that's essentially, my meditation is literally just my own breathing, running. I always like to run.
Today's Beer Minute is brought to you by Starving Artist Brewery, who share a simple belief that you should judge beer and not people. Today's beer is from Ouzelfinch Beers and Blending out of Fort Monroe, Virginia. It's their Girls Got Gumption Hazy IPA. This girl is thick in both pour and in taste. Coming in at just over 7%, this is for those IPA lovers who are looking for a bold IPA flavor that both balances the sweet citrus flavors and the bitterness of a great hazy IPA. Thanks to Starving Artist Brewery, who remind you to support your starving artists. And please, always drink responsibly. And now, back to the show. It's funny, I used to run. I'm starting to get back into it, but I think the years of in my youth of skateboarding and doing other stupid things and having injuries playing sports, it's like sometimes my joints and my body doesn't want to just pick up and do the thing anymore with as much ease or fluidity as it used to. But it's kind of funny because, like, as I get older, you were talking about how, you kind of get lost in, like, can't really focus because you're too focused on what could have been or the instrumentation or things, and you're trying to pick it apart. I feel like sometimes, and I just was talking about this with someone on a different episode that's not out, but I was making the comment about, like, the best thing I've ever really done, the most rewarding thing I've done is kind of finding my way through the music industry in a couple of different ways. Like booking shows taught me a lot about the business side of things, got me to see a lot of cool bands, got me to understand more of like live mixing and mic placement and a lot of other things. And that there's so many talented bands out there that, maybe aren't, an internationally touring band, but some band from South Carolina that's just kind of coming through and on a small deal, like, can be just as good as some of these other bands you'll see. So it really kind of taught me a lot about that. Same with writing about, being at a show and trying to bring forth the experience of being in a room with people, seeing a band, seeing the symbiotic relationship between the two, but then putting it to words. So that way, if you were there, you felt like that was an accurate description. But also if you weren't, that you're like, oh man, that sounds so cool. I really wish I would have been there. You kind of put me right in it. And that's hard. And then even doing this where it's like, in the beginning of the show, it was more of a standard press junket kind of thing where okay, you got 20 minutes with someone, listen to the new album, try to find something that's unique that maybe the next 100 people that these guys are going to talk to haven't found. And through it all, it's ruined kind of music for me because I don't listen. I'm starting to get back to it, but it's like I don't really listen to music anymore the same way I used to. Where it's like, this is a fun song. It's like, oh, this is really cool. And like they use this chord structure, this chord progression, but I noticed it's actually they use the same melody in another song. I wonder if there's like some kind of through line between this or what the thing was for that, or going to shows. It's like, oh, I wonder what the guarantee was. How many people came in? Oh, this wasn't really good. Oh, I wonder what the merch cut it. Like, you've opened Pandora's box and now it's forever ruined. And it's like, I love that I have all these experiences, but I also kind of wish I was a naive music fan who could just go to these things, enjoy them for what they are and how they make me feel versus picking it apart to death.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't put it better myself. That is one of the side effects, I think, of the internet too, because when you put new music out today, for example, people don't live with the record. So you get people do a speed listen and they'll give a reaction to your record, and if it's a negative one, you'll find maybe 200 people coming in behind them and say, yeah, I thought the same thing, and I feel that's a really bad thing, that everybody basically can't kind of climatize to the record. Everything is just coming at lightning speed, and it's kind of put me off the internet in one way, because if you write music, I like to lock myself away. I don't like to kind of read the latest trends or what's going on. I just rather just kind of try to block all that stuff out, because the latest trend is going to be out of date by the time I come out with something. So I tend not to even try to focus on it. I try to just work within my own mindset. And sometimes, you bring a record out and, people will immediately make an evaluation within probably, I remember bringing out a record, it was out maybe 10 minutes and people were already leaving reviews of the album. The album was 40 minutes long. It's not possible to have given that a fair listen. It's speed listening. And it's like the internet today, especially Spotify and Apple Music, have killed the concept of the album as well. It's like a big jukebox. And one thing I noticed was Spotify works if you have one style of music. It works. And when I mean one style, I mean one style of song. So if you just write just ambient music, you get onto ambient playlists. It doesn't like the idea that you kind of can have a rock song, then an ambient song, because they don't know where to place you. And it makes, the creator's job kind of more difficult, I guess, if you're kind of having different kind of music mixed in. They're too lazy to go through it all. There's probably too many releases. So people definitely get rewarded for just doing one style of music, one style of song, and then just blasting it out to the internet. Music for sleep and music for the gym or whatever. It's become like that, and I personally think the album is dead from that point of view. I think people want to hear a bulk of songs, but they don't really want to hear anything too different. They just want music for one mood and then another band for another mood. And I kind of find that kind of stuff really disheartening. And so that was half of the reason I did the Somnia thing, because I took nearly 15 of our ambient songs that we've written and say, look, I'll put them all in one collection so you can kind of digest it there. And I did it in a way that I thought was at least tasteful. But it's kind of the sad state of affairs that we kind of have to go and do things like that so people can at least hear our ambient stuff and not, I guess, be rudely interrupted by some of our heavier stuff. But that is kind of the way that it's gone. And I kind of dread releasing music because, people are kind of ready to really, some of them are genuine. Maybe they thought you were going to give them something different and you gave them, something they didn't expect. But they won't even live with it for a few months before they give their opinion. I remember once we brought this album called Age of the Fifth Sun out, and it's got a load of people giving out to us for putting this record out. And I remember 6 months later, some of the kids kind of emailed me back saying, sorry, we actually like it now. I think it's too late. You kind of set the whole thing on me now. It's like people are, and it kind of can't affect you. If you're relying on people to tell you whether your stuff is good or not. So these days I tend to put it out and I don't check the internet. I just turn it off. I just don't want to know. Because I can't. If you're writing music for other folks, it's just not going to turn out to be anything, I think, special. I think it's just writing music and trying to guess what the next style is going to be. I don't know what it is, and I kind of don't want to know. I'm just going to write and see what happens, and if we land on the right side of the path, we did it by accident, I guess, or did it by our own instincts. So, yeah, that's a problem with the internet, because in the 90s, when Metallica, for example, brought out the Black Album, I'm sure if that was during the internet age, they would have been absolutely lacerated for, what happened to the thrash metal part of Metallica, what happened to this, what happened to that, it's pop stuff. But people actually had to sit with it and kind of, hold on a second, there is some good music in this album all the same, so it's not the same as the last stuff. And it kind of broke big. I actually think if they did that today and they had brought that album during the internet age, they might not have gone anywhere with that album, to be honest. I think the kids would have absolutely ripped it apart.
Well, it becomes like this whole thing, like where you kind of touched on the whole thing of like people commenting on something before it, like there's literally no way you could have given the thing, whatever it is, a fair like time, because like you said, like 10 minutes after you put out a record or a song, people are already like commenting on it, and it's like there's no fucking way. Like this thing's 40 minutes long, 10 minutes later you're already commenting like don't like this record, and it's like, how? You haven't listened to there's no way you could have literally listened to the whole thing. And it's something I comment on a lot, and I was making the friend of mine on Twitter the other day was talking about Kendrick Lamar and the new record being his best, and I was like, I hate to be this person, but I was like, because I know it's me, and I don't listen to music the same way a lot of other people do, like even just in how I do it. Like I, for the longest time with my CDs, and I still kind of do this with records, I'll listen to the first half of a record and I'll just wear it out. Like if it's 10 songs, I'll listen to the first 5 and just repeat them. And then when I'm kind of tired of those, or like where I'm like, all right, I think I really understand this part, I now have a whole nother half of a record that's brand new. And then it's like, oh man, I thought these 5 songs are really good. Holy shit, the back half of this record is even better. And it keeps it new. And like I was making the comment to my friend, I was like, I'm still listening to stuff off of To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick, and that record's like over 10 years old, and I'm still picking up on little nuances, turn of phrases, things that I've never noticed before. But I'm also willing to experiment with how I'm taking it in. Like sometimes I'll listen to it straight through. I have it on vinyl, so like there's something to be said about when you have to physically be a part of the listening experience of, okay, now I got to flip it over. It's 2 albums, so I got to flip it over twice, or 3 times, 4 times, whatever. Listening to it in headphones, listening to it while you're high, listening to it while you're driving at night, while you're driving in general, just sitting there, listening to it with other people. And to me, I don't feel like people are willing to find these records and really let them become a part of them. And I think even something else over the last handful of years, more so in the day and age of digital listening experiences, something I've really found a lot of value in as well is shuffle. Like, and I know it sounds so stupid to say it like that, but it's like there are albums where I would listen to a song and I'm like, man, this song sucks. I don't understand why this song's on the record. It completely fucks with the flow when you listen to it. And then you hit shuffle and it happens to be paired with something else. And you're like, holy shit, this song's amazing. It was in the wrong spot. And it's so incredible to have those, to be able to spend that amount of time with an album or a music, and then adversely to then go see, on a touring cycle, see an album live. And I know a very controversial person to talk about, but in that same breath, going to see Kanye West on the Life of Pablo tour, there was a lot of that record I was like, I don't get this. Like, what the fuck is this? And then I saw it live in front of a full arena full of people reacting to it. And I go, oh, this was never meant for the record. This was meant for the live, always. Because chances are when he was writing it, he's listening back to it live with a bunch of people in the studio and vibing and being like, yeah, this part, da, 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 da. Same as when you're in a room with your bandmates and you're writing together, you kind of are able to harness an energy together that maybe wouldn't have been there if you're writing your parts or recording your parts individually. And, even seeing a band like Lamb of God write most of their record, the last record they just put out was mostly recorded live. And they were saying that even like their vocalists' tracks that are on the record are the ones live from in the room when they were, jamming together. And it's like, there's something to be said about kind of I guess it's really what we're harping on here, sort of throughout the whole conversation, but just the real experience of being there, creating something real in the moment, and letting it take over and letting it kind of speak to you and allowing you to have time with all of it. And I feel like no one wants to invest the time anymore into anything. They just want to have that immediate reaction onto the next thing. And that as a whole, most forms of art and life, I guess, have become disposable.
Yeah, very true. I think when you're putting out music, sometimes the audience might misunderstand what it is you're trying to convey as well. You know, they might be thinking you're writing something to get them jumping up and down, for example, and suddenly you're targeting something completely different, and they get disappointed with that. I remember we brought this album out called Epitaph, which was written in memory of our 7-year-old cousin who had tragically life was taken, and I remember the amount of comments coming out, and it's like, oh, they're trying to do this now, they're trying to do that. And all it was, literally, was something that I wrote in memory of a young child. And people totally misunderstood it, still misunderstand it. That album is as deeply personal as anything has ever been, and everything's exactly the way it needs to be on that record for it to make sense to what I experienced. And when people seen it live, it suddenly clicked. It just made sense to a lot of people, saying, oh, okay, now I get it, I understand what this is all about. Like, even that's not the title track, Epitaph, there's people saying, well, what's all that? It's like a film score in the middle. I said, no, that all that sounds that you're hearing is literally kind of representing decomposition, and it's very, is a lot, everything that's in there is put in for a reason, because everything that I experienced was dread, and I wanted to capture that. And, you know, down to the detuned guitars, I wasn't trying to be a doom rock band. I was trying to musically represent what I was feeling and what we had gone through. And I think that record, to me, is, I think people would need to maybe go through what we went through to kind of understand it a little bit more. Songs like Coma Rebbe, all those things were kind of written to kind of get me past that moment in time. And to me, that's really what music is about, is writing. It's a cathartic experience, something that I need to write in order to make sense of the world. And I'm not there to write music to try and be the next trendy band, or to try and write something that's going to get, you know, sell a lot of records. I'm not really interested in making that kind of music. And music overall, it is subjective, we know that, and people are going to leave whatever opinion they want. But I do think people need to take the time to at least try to, if you want to give the band a chance, go check it out live, go sit and listen to the entire records. For example, if you speed, or you just randomly listen to one song but you didn't listen to the song before, it may not have made sense. You kind of need to listen to it in relation to where it's positioned. Sometimes you're right, bands do get it wrong. Sometimes they put a song and it just didn't sit in the right place, and that is one of the, I suppose, benefits of maybe, you know, hitting shuffle or something like that. You could hear it in a different way. I've always said this, and I've worked with many bands. Most bands have, all bands I should say, have what I call a blind spot. It's when you write something, it makes perfect sense to you, but it may not make any sense to anybody else. So I kind of look at it this way, that we've kind of got to get a mirror and just be able to kind of position it in such a way that we can kind of see that blind spot. And usually, I think time sorts that stuff quite out. So never be in a rush to release anything too quick either, because it might not be what you think you're putting out. So we usually sit with things, you know, at least once it's all written, I'll sit there, you know, 6 months to maybe even 7 months before I bring it out, just to see, do I still get any feeling off it. And normally, you know, I've been satisfied. I've gotten it wrong a couple of times, I won't lie to you, but it's overall, you know, satisfied enough with our output, I think.
I think even in that, I think it's interesting, like, that you're saying that you will sit with something and see if it's still, I don't necessarily want to put words in your mouth, but like, see if it still resonates with you, if you still feel the same way as when you created the art, that, you know, if the emotions that inspired what you were doing still feel the same. And I think sometimes I think that's the hard thing sometimes, is actually separating maybe the raw emotion of what you're feeling in in that moment that's inspired something, and kind of maybe, I don't want to say sterilizing it, but I think you're able to tweak things to where the idea comes across more uniform. Like it makes more sense when you do it. And I think, and it's funny because for me, it took kind of therapy to kind of realize that sometimes, like a key phrase, like in therapy, when I went through it, facts aren't feelings. And I kind of was like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, because you're always taught to kind of, feel things and to kind of speak to how you feel, when you're going through couples therapy, not that I've done it, but, they always say, tell someone how you feel. How did that make you feel? Because they want you to be in touch with, what's happening and make you realize, like, it makes me feel this way. So now you're trying to vocalize it and find the words. But it's interesting when they then turn around and go, facts aren't feelings. And you're like, well, wait, we just kind of have gone through this whole thing of finding how I feel about something, vocalizing it. And then when I tell you something, you're like, well, facts aren't feelings. Facts are rooted in a thing. They don't have feelings attached to them. They just are. They're absolutes. And even doing that and listening to music, going through therapy and coming to like some of these bigger concepts and listening to things, it's like, it's interesting. I don't want to say things are sterile anymore or that they're less raw, but I think there is something to be said about being able to understand that the emotions that are inspiring you to create something, whatever it is in whatever medium, that there is also a technical lens that you could go through, re-look at it, and then go, okay, I understand why this is, but it could be done better. It could be executed better. And then at the end of the day, realizing that there is, I think, maybe more impact in that, because then it will come across more clear and people will be able to understand you. And at the end of the day, music, art, film, whatever, it's all about communicating with one another. And that's what you want to do. You want to be able to communicate and have a conversation with someone. And if you're not able to communicate your thoughts very well because of the feelings, then it becomes kind of lost in translation. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing as I've gotten older to think about it a lot more.
Yeah, no, 100%. When you I always find kind of a process that has to happen is when you're writing music, you can't be thinking about reaction. You can't be thinking about what people are going to be thinking about, what they're going to say. You've just got to kind of focus at the first task, which is to kind of get whatever's on your chest and try to put it into music, unfiltered. Don't think about anything else. I think usually a mistake that bands make, they try to kind of do the second phase at the same time, which is essentially now, is that going to work with our audience base? How are the critics going to react to this? That has to be done, in my opinion, as a totally separate phase. Write as much music as you can, record it, then step away and ask yourself how, then put the business hat on and say to yourself, okay, is this going to make sense to the audience base that we're going to be releasing it to? How is it going to do critically? You kind of have to look at those things. It's very, very different from when we started. We wouldn't have thought of any of those things. But now I've got to think to myself, hold on a second, if I put this album out, is it going to finish this? And there's an album we did called Origins, where that didn't go down too well. And I didn't do that on that record. I just threw whatever and hope it would all stick. It didn't. And some of my favorite songs are on that album, but I wish there was an EP at this point. But I learned from that record, we better, at least play this stuff in front of an audience a couple of times as well. There's another thing that bands make terrible mistakes. How do you know you're going to get a really good? You can write a great album, but what if it all doesn't sound very good live? You can't even play it. And that's happened a few times as well. I'd write an album and it's like, shit, we better start throwing some of the old stuff back in because we're kind of losing the crowd here. So these days I'd like to at least be able to at least place 75% of it live first to see what it would sound like in that environment. If I wasn't playing live, I guess I wouldn't have to do that, but I still think it's a good test to see if the song, you might learn something as well. We've gone back plenty of times and re-recorded something after playing it live and said, shit, that section was really crap live, and you start to kind of readapt certain things. And we've done that our whole career, where our first album we would automatically speed it up live and change the tempo. So these days we try to focus it so that the live experience and that the record experience are a little bit more aligned rather than two total different entities. Those are a couple of things that we've been doing. Some of the ambient stuff probably doesn't, again, it's all about environment. You could be in a totally different environment with a sit down theater, some nice visuals behind, and you could probably play the ambient stuff. So I still do that stuff because I know there's a way that I could make that work live in a different environment. But most of our gigs, there's a huge anticipation. There's kids ready to kind of come on, see what you got, so you can't really start off with anything too ambient. But saying that, we have found a way to incorporate some of those ambient songs live as well, just to kind of give a little bit of light and shade. But yeah, that's one thing I would definitely recommend to people out there. Try to separate, write your best music and then come back to it a couple of months later and see, does it resonate with you, and see, does it make sense to what's going on in your specific genre, I guess, to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. Because if you get it wrong, you can lose interest very, very quickly. And that's one thing, after 20 years of doing this, trying to stay relevant is so damn hard. It really, really is really, really hard. It's so much new music coming up, and it's very easy suddenly to say, hold on a sec, shit, we're actually kind of considered out of date and old and no longer relevant. That's a constant fear. We try to really do our best to not let that happen. And, the fact that we're still here, we're doing okay, I think.
Well, I think there even becomes this thing, and I was, again, it's always funny because I feel like I wonder if people, when I say like, oh, I was having a conversation or I was thinking about things, that people are like, no, you didn't. But it was one of those things where I was having a conversation the other day with someone, and it was more, as you're talking about putting on the business hat, doing this even is it's not the same as being in a band, but there are a lot of similarities. And it's like, okay, people, like, I've built up an audience organically. People expect it to be a certain thing. It's kind of shifted a little bit over the years. So there's the change in sound, who's still riding with that, who, did I lose, so on and so forth. But there's even the side of things where, like, it comes down to like the socials, and are you doing these things, and are you following these different trends? Are you everywhere? And, I was making the comment about, like, I've just really been fatigued and burned out on social media. Like, I don't really enjoy it anymore. A lot of the aspects of it, like, if I didn't have the podcast, I probably would delete most of it at this point. But because you need either the like, with Facebook, I need a personal profile so I can then post and have a liked page and all that kind of stuff. But it becomes this thing where, he was like, oh, like the person I was talking to was like, oh, on this, you need to like create this, and then you need to do this, and you need to do this. And I was like, I don't care. I honestly don't care. And I was like, I'm at a point, and again, this kind of goes back to like introspective and kind of just realizing the journey and being like stepping away for a minute and then realizing where you're at with it and kind of finding peace in it. And I go, to put it in band terms, maybe I'm just always meant to be a club band. I'll maybe sometimes get offered a really great like arena tour, and I'll be the first of 4 or maybe like 2 of 4, and it'll give me a little boost, and maybe I'll get like, I'll sell out I'll get bumped up a little bit, and I'll get to play some of these bigger rooms. And I go, but by and large, I just am what I am. This is where I'll be. And I go, and instead of going, oh, well, I'll never be an arena band, it's like, well, take solace that I started off as nothing, and now I'm at a club level, and I can sustain a pretty decent career doing that. Why not be happy with the success of what you've done and the time you put in, and be happy in it, than to be in it and be miserable because you're not where you maybe want to be, or all the things. And also being real with yourself that it's like, I'm sure I could get there, but at what cost? Do I want to spend all the money on all these different social medias to have targeted ads and grow my fan base? Are those people I even want listening? Are they really going to get anything out of the conversation, or are they just looking for those quick 10, 15, 20-minute interviews that don't satiate anything, don't really get into anything? I don't think I want that either. And I was like, and I think it really does come from being real with yourself and being able to really, like I said, step outside of it and go, this is good. This, like, most people would want this. At a certain point when I started, this is where I wanted to be. Why am I not happy being somewhere that obviously took work, took sacrifice, and is an upward trajectory, why can't I be happy here? Why do I have to keep wanting more and never enjoy the fruits of the labor that I have? And I haven't figured out what attributes to that, but it is interesting that when I've talked to a few people about that idea and saying that, like, this is where I think the podcast will be, and I'm okay with it, that the reactions are either, yeah, you're right, and you should be. But then I've also gotten the same where it's like, well, you're just being complacent and lazy. And it's like, am I though?
Yeah, it's some really good points there. I think when you're used to kind of building something and creating it, where there's kind of a feeling that you got to keep doing that. You know, you got to keep moving in an upward trajectory, and I think that's kind of ingrained into us as kind of people that kind of want to build something. You know, sometimes you got to ask yourself, where do you stop, and where do you kind of find that place where you're happy with. I personally would hate to be an arena level band. Just the amount of stuff, you know, that you'd have to basically really do wouldn't interest me at all. I'm not a fan of social media at all. I don't think I'll be on social media again, very similar to yourself, only for I have the band there. I hate TikTok. I can't stand it. It's just, people say, oh, you better get your stuff up there, you know, there's new fans. You know, I don't want those fans. I'm not interested. I think that site is just, it's awful. I don't like Instagram much better either. Okay, you get to see some pictures of bands, and so at least you get to see some footage of some live stuff sometimes as well. But it's all image orientated again. It's like all based on, you know, fashion almost to me when I see that stuff. And we started off with MySpace, and it kind of made sense that, you know, you have your little jukebox there, and you get to hear some music at least. And then somehow Facebook took over, and that's awful too. I just don't like Facebook either. And it's like, we're running this competition actually at the moment. It wasn't even my idea. It was, we have this home show in Dublin. It's our 20-year anniversary. And it was an idea that we you know, the ticket sales are actually pretty good, so we wouldn't need to do it, but it was one of the early ideas that we'd kind of give away one of our guitar pedals that we've been using throughout the years, and we'd sign the pedal. And the promoter decided to do a bit of a promoted post on it, but the amount of stupid comments, I mean, like, who are these guys signing these pedals, you know? And I was just like, it's just a guitar pedal, guys, you know, it's no big deal. But it's kind of, people try to find humor in just about everything. It doesn't make it better when the pedal was called a big muff, you know. So you kind of, I get it, but it's just like, I just don't need this on a Monday morning or whatever to be reading this kind of crap, you know. And you're kind of thinking, Jesus Christ, it's the last time I'm giving a pedal away for anybody, you know. But yeah, I don't like social media. I don't, and I see the people that do well. A lot of it's not just music orientated. It's almost like the kind of, you know, if they're kind of going for something gothic or clothes or different things, you know, I'm just not really interested in all that stuff. I just personally think Facebook is dead anyway. You literally can't do anything unless you promote the post. And I actually was trying to promote an Instagram post just for our last tour, just to kind of let people know that we're playing in certain cities. But somehow I made a mistake. I ended up promoting Facebook as well, because they're all linked via this meta thing. And the amount of comments that came up, like our Facebook page was, I'm not gonna lie to you, it was literally dormant. It was not doing anything. Next thing was like 3,000 likes and nearly like 50 stupid comments that I had to literally delete. It's just stupid stuff, you know what I mean? Just people, I just think Facebook it's lightweight entertainment, and I don't think it's very artistic. And I just gravitate away from all that stuff. And that's one of the sides of social media and the internet. I wish it wasn't like that. I don't mind sites like Bands in Town. You sign up to it, you can see if your band is playing in a city. That makes perfect sense to me. I do understand Spotify and Apple Music as well. I just don't think they pay the musician fairly, but I get it, and I still think it's great for the audience to, you know, to be able to find music, and Bandcamp probably be my favorite of all of them. You know, at least there's a sense of, you know, giving something back to the musician. I hope they never change that, especially with their Bandcamp Fridays and stuff like that. So that would be. I don't listen to Spotify. I do have, it's Bandcamp is what I primarily support as a private listener. But yeah, that's social media, and I just can't see how TikTok is any way relevant to what I do.
Well, I take it even a step further, in the conversations I have, because I think it, and again, kind of saying how things mirror, like this mirrors the music industry, mirrors being in a band. I'll have people who work in different facets of the music industry, and someone will be like, "Yeah, are you putting on like your 10 hashtags on your Instagram posts? Are you?" And I remember saying to someone the other day, I go, dude, I just turned 38. I have never followed a hashtag. I've never clicked a fucking hashtag. I go, be real. Have you? And they're like, no. And I go, so why? Why do we assume that like someone told us these rules? Someone said, oh, you have to do this. Why? Like I go, and for like an interesting aside, so when I was at the Bring Me show, like I've been trying to be more like not living through my phone, which I don't have to because everyone usually has one right in front of my own face. So I can like when I lost the singer for a minute, I just kind of followed around the like panorama view I had in front of me on these 4K display phones and shit, and I was just like, oh, there he is, he's over there. And then I kind of looked at it through someone's camera because they're zooming in and filming everything. So it's like I don't need my phone out because you have it all for me. And then if I ever want to get nostalgic, I'll just go on YouTube and find someone's video. I don't have to have it on my own phone. But at one point, I took a photo because there was the album cover for one of theirs came on, and it just was interesting. And the color scheme that they had for it was, flames, and it was kind of erupting around this thing. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But then a happy accident happened where their singer walked in front of it basically and kind of did one of these things with his back to us. And I took a photo because the bottom of the cloud of flame or whatever, he was almost positioned perfectly in front of in the middle. And I was like, oh, that's visually really interesting. And it reminded me of Starman from Rush's 2112 album. And again, a reference no one in that crowd is probably like, oh my God, Rush, Starman. But there I am. And I was like, oh, it's cool. And I got it. And then, I saw a lot of people taking the same videos, same photos, but I don't think they were understanding like same thing like with me where I'm like, this visually is a really cool moment. It like looks cool. It's interesting. It reminds me of something else that if I were to do a side by side, a lot of people would be like, I would have never put that together. And to me, that was the interesting part about it is having the same shared experience with people, but having a completely different motive as to why. But the whole point of that is I posted that on Instagram. I didn't hashtag it. I didn't do anything. That post is doing better on my Instagram than anything else that I've tried to do those things for. And it was on my personal page where I just like, I don't care. I don't care if anyone sees this. I have my friends. And I mean, it's something there that to me, it's like photography is something I enjoy. I don't spend a lot of money into it. It's literally just my camera because I'm more of the point and shoot thing. I want to kind of capture a moment versus setting something up with the lighting and doing all this stuff because I'm impatient in that regard. But it's funny that people will tell you have to do these things. And TikTok, same thing. My wife was like, you should get a TikTok. Maybe more people will do this thing. And I got it. And I was like, but I don't understand it. I don't understand the point of it. Like, what is it supposed to be? Is it supposed to be for music? Is it supposed to be for dancing? Is it for comedy? Like, I know everyone kind of blurs the lines of what it is for, but for me and what I would be using it for, which is, again, I don't want to use it. I don't care. I don't have it. I didn't have it. I had it for a second. I tried watching shit, and then it would be like, it would suggest so many other things than what I literally, send things I was following. It would just pump so much other shit in my feed that I was like, I don't even get to see the thing I wanted to. So I don't fucking want this. Anything else that's going to break through, someone will show me because that's how things work now. And I just don't care. And I remember making the comment to my friend, I was like, at the end of the day, creating all this separate content for all these other platforms, is it going to get someone to listen to the full episode? And he was like, I don't know. And I go, so far, it seems like the answer is no. And I go, and I can literally post a link in my Instagram stories. I can make it so fucking easy for people to go to the thing I want them to go to, which is this, and to listen to the entire thing. And that doesn't happen. So at the end of the day, if that's my end goal, which is to get people to listen to this, and I'm creating and spending all this time creating shit to entice you to catch a 2-minute clip or whatever, to then go listen to the whole thing. If you aren't doing that, then what is the point? And when I kind of break it down that simply, most people are just like, well, yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, because like I don't want to be a brand, I don't want to be a celebrity, I don't want to be this thing, which is odd because I'm the only thing doing this. So obviously I feel like I have something that I have to say. It's kind of a weird duality. But by and large, I just don't care. Like, and I think in this day and age, that's like it's not normal. And I was kind of talking to another person on the podcast about, I always get told I'm an old soul. And, this whole idea of like, you feel like you're older than you are. And the only thing I had the epiphany of the other day that makes me think that people come to that conclusion is because when you get old, you become so I don't want to say self-aware. You just kind of lose the bullshit of like ego and having to present for other things. And you're just you and you're comfortable in who you are. And I think that that's something that people get to when they get older. And so when people say that, I think that's kind of what it means. But I take pride in that because I'm like, yeah, because I think I can see past all the bullshit of social media, and then it's garbage and it doesn't mean anything. It literally holds no value in anything. And the only thing I think it has done is make people think that are peripherally friends that don't invest back into you and do a 50-50 to keep the relationship going. I think it digitally makes people feel like they're still a part of your life, even though they haven't texted you, haven't seen you in a handful of years. And then it creates this weird thing when you finally do see each other and you're like, yeah, man, so how you been? I'm great. I went and did this. Oh yeah, I saw that on Instagram, or I saw that on Facebook, or I saw your post. And then it's like, so something that I experienced that I was going to tell you. And yes, I put it in a very little short blurb or in photos. You've now relegated and taken away the experience that I was going to share with you. And then I think it goes beyond that to that's where we've started losing like tribal knowledge and learning from other people because we're just like, oh, I saw it, so I know.
Yeah. It's very true. I mean, you'll have a lot of people even today, they will judge a band from what they see on YouTube or on Instagram, and they never even went to watch them live. So you get that kind of stuff going. And then, getting back onto TikTok, it's like, it's not really for music. To me, it's what I call really crap lightweight entertainment. Is just going through your phone when you're trying to fall asleep and looking at stupid videos of people maybe pulling pranks to buskers on the street or whatever. Just something just to get a kind of a quick kind of, oh yeah, that's funny, next one. You try to put some decent footage up there of your band playing or something on TikTok, it'll get zero interest. They would rather see a guy throwing a stone into a river or something like that and splashing a guy on a boat. That's the kind of crappy entertainment and the thing is this, you see, you've been around long enough to know that this stuff wasn't going to age very well either. I mean, you could see TikTok in 10 years time and people are going to be wondering why the hell anybody even looked at that crap. And Facebook, you can already see it. I mean, when that site is awful. It's literally the pits. It's the worst crap that comes up on your news feed nearly all the time. And I think to myself, why did I even go on Facebook? I mean, the idea of Facebook, I did it because MySpace died, and that became uncool, probably for obvious reasons. Facebook is kind of worse. You can't even put your music on your site now. People have to go off to another site to listen to it. So to me, it's kind of worse than MySpace. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so now this is kind of lightweight entertainment. People are not really there to find music. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And I kind of wondered to myself, if we never went on social media, would we be in the same position we are now? Or would we be smaller or bigger? I don't know. I don't know how relevant it all is. I kind of thought to myself, do people kind of look at your concert dates, for example, on Facebook to see where you're playing next? Maybe it's useful that way. But then again, I kind of, last few tours I'll be asking fans, well, where did you hear about us playing? Oh yeah, we just kind of looked at the local kind of magazines, and so it's really rarely off Facebook. And so I think the whole thing might not be, it might be a bit of a, people probably won't do it just in case it is really important, but my guess, I don't think it's as important as people think it is. I think Facebook is, and Instagram, and definitely TikTok, and even Twitter, it's all a waste of time, really. Probably if people are interested in your music, they'll find it. If you're up on sites like, I don't know, Bandcamp, and bands in town, so they know where you're playing live. If people want to know when we're playing, if we're coming back to the US, you'll see it up in bands in town. I think that site's is pretty decent. There's no bullshit in it. It's just, it comes up in your email feed. You're playing a band that you want to see is coming to town. Go and check them out. But the last thing I want to do is, oh yeah, I checked it out on Instagram, yeah, and then kind of have an opinion on the band. You look, it's not the same thing. You got to be in the room, check the band out properly. But I get it. I get the why it's there. I'm just not a fan of it. That's kind of, and YouTube, it's similar stuff again. You can, especially with all those short videos coming up now, it's kind of gotten worse for me as well. I kind of, it's like you have to keep going to the next one, on to the next one. I'd rather just listen to, like a 45-minute podcast or an hour podcast and just leave it on the background if I'm doing something else, But the idea, I have to keep coming back to my phone or to the computer and hit next to the next video. I kind of hate all that stuff, really. And I just think word of mouth still exists too. People still talk to each other, but not as much as they did because of all this crap. So I kind of think the internet, in many ways, these are the ugly side of the internet. I don't think has improved anything. I think it's made some things worse, I think.
As you were just saying, using Bandcamp and bands in town as kind of talking points. Again, this is why I love doing this, because there's usually one thing that I'll be like, I never thought of that. And to me, that's worth doing this whole thing, because it's an exchanging of conversation. It's an exchanging of ideas, and maybe if you're willing to be a part of it, you can learn something or take away something, and then kind of think about it a little bit more and see how it resonates and impacts your own life after doing this. As you were talking about those two sites versus everything else that we've been talking about in the last probably 15, 20 minutes, the one thing I keep coming back to when you were saying that is because those sites are literally just for what they are. It's not a hyphen of other things. It doesn't need to be 17 different things. It literally just is what it is. What is Bandcamp? It's where my music is. You can go buy it. You can download it, do all those things. Okay. It's not trying to be anything else. It just is what it is. Bands in town. What is the point? Is your band in town? Is it coming to town? Keeps you a track of alert on tours. Very simple. It's not trying to be anything else other than what it is. And the irony is, for as simplistic as those two ideas are, they work. They haven't really fucked with it to make it be something more than it needed to be. It just lives in its most simplest state, and it's still successful. Meanwhile, you look at, MySpace I guess MySpace and every other form of social media. Even Instagram. Instagram was just literally supposed to be photos, maybe a small caption. Now it's videos and it's stories and reels and all this other stuff. And it's like, I understand you have to adapt and change to something to maybe be successful, or your target, changes or whatever. But at the same time, again, just go back to the two sites that we just talked about. They haven't changed. They are what they are, and everyone knows what they are. And there's kind of something to be said about, you don't need to keep fucking with something. Simple is easier. And it's just, I feel like we're going to keep beating a dead horse, and I have to go to work here in a couple minutes. I feel like that's a really good spot to leave off on, because I feel like so many overthink things that constantly aren't dedicated to one thing anymore and perfecting it. They go off and do a million things half-assed. And I feel like that's kind of why a band like yourself, I think, has sustained a career. It's not as big as others may have hoped, or maybe you at one point would have hoped. But I think it's true to the people who started 20 years ago writing the music that, was your first album, and is still true to who you are and still why you do it, because you're still growing. You still know how to do the one thing, and you are just expanding what the thing is and adding to it to keep growing. But it's keeping it simple. It's keeping it original to the original idea. And whereas everyone else is trying to just go everywhere, but they're going nowhere all at the same time.
Yeah, I couldn't put it better myself. I just tend to think it makes more sense to focus on the sites where you're maybe really are targeting the audience that is relevant to you. Facebook, for example, targets people that shouldn't even be exposed to our music whatsoever. You're talking about people that are into completely different things come across your music, and it's just lost in translation to that. It's a waste of everybody's time and energy. And I think that is the problem. I think sites, to be successful, need to be focused on the one thing, if you, and not to try and spread it all out in a way that it makes no sense to anybody anymore. And music, I personally think I see it as an art form. And there's two different sides of the music industry. You've got the entertainment industry, and then you've got the music industry. Two totally different things. Pop to me is entertainment. I don't even class that. So if I see some act that's just blown up but they're making pop music, I don't care about it. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't interest me whatsoever, because that's the entertainment. And I would hate to be in a pop band or an entertainment industry band where you're on the X Factor and all these shows as cameos, and I hate all that. And I think Facebook, unfortunately, is not able to kind of filter out that when you're targeting your audience, right? It's just literally every idiot under the sun is looking at, clips of us playing live and somebody leaving a comment that's completely stupid. Where's the vocals, for example, in our case, and if it's a metal band, why are they screaming? Where's the singing? And I just find Facebook is not good that way, and I think he's done the same thing now with Instagram. He's just made a mess of that side as well. Twitter is what it is. It's probably more politically based, from what I can see for most of it. But it's still, what we use Twitter for is literally just put up our reviews that are for our albums and just leave it at that. I can't see any other use for it. We don't. I mean, I don't want to offer any political opinion to anybody. I'm a musician at the end of the day, but we just put it anytime we get reviews, good concert reviews or anything, and some interesting photographs, we'll just tweet it on Twitter. That's the only thing we use that for. But again, it's not probably for that either. So yeah, I would much prefer if just to stick with the sites that kind of are more focused. Bandcamp makes perfect sense. You can buy our t-shirts, you can buy whatever you want from that site. You can also check everything that's relevant about the band is up there, and then bands in town, if you just want to get an email to know where you're at. YouTube kind of makes sense if you're bringing a new video out, I guess. For a single, people can see it there. Bar that, I'm not really interested in the whole thing, and at this point I don't really care if the band gets bigger or not. I'll just keep doing what we're doing. If there's enough interest there, we'll keep touring. We do hope to come back to the US in 2024 as well. There's talk about it, so we'll see if we can make it happen. It's very, very expensive for us to go to the US, but I'd like to kind of come back with somehow hire some proper amplifiers next time rather than using Axe effects and put the kind of shows that we're doing in over here. That would be a nice way to at least come back to the States one more time if we can do it. And apart from that, we're working on a new album as well, so who knows, 2024 we might be back in the US with it. Fingers crossed.
Well, you just pretty much hit on all the things I usually say to incorporate, like where can everyone find you? What do you want to plug online? I think you literally just did it. It's been really great getting to talk to you, and I'll put a caveat out there of hopefully in 2024, whenever it is, if you're somewhere around the Midwest of, Michigan, Chicago, I don't really think you would go to Ohio. There's probably a spot in Ohio, but I just don't like Ohio personally. But if you're around the area, have to maybe do one of these in person, and maybe we'll do like a fun bonus content creating thing, and I'll just go live and be like, hey, here's the amp he actually spent probably thousands and thousands of dollars to bring over here, and we can talk about tour budgeting, because I think that's really interesting right now. Kind of talking, as we were saying earlier, just about how the world has been brought together in the last handful of years, due to the digital internet age. But you're seeing bands, even like Anthrax had to cancel a whole European run because just logistically it just cost too much for even them to go. So to me, I think even that side of things is really interesting to kind of talk about and break down, because I think fans sometimes will be like, oh, that band will be around, I'll go see them next time, and then they don't. And I mean, there's plenty of bands I never thought I'd get to see from international touring bands, and even bands locally that broke up or just financially couldn't do it. So I've always been of the mind that I'll go spend the money, I'll go travel and go see a band when I can, because I never know if I'll get to see them. And I definitely have not gotten to see you guys live, and you're one of those. Like, it's so funny of the day of this chat, because like this past weekend, Botch did a reunion show, and after they've been saying we're not going to do one, we're not playing, and then they did, and then I'm just kind of like, I feel like a lot of the bands that I never got to see from 20 years ago, either being too young to go see them, not having the money, whatever the reason is, now I'm at a point, and this is kind of the fun part of being a quote unquote adult, is that now I have some money or a credit card. I can go put something on and go see some of these bands that I've never got to, and at least get the one experience of doing such.
All I can say from our last tour, boy, has it changed. Touring, it's so expensive. It's shocking. We're just big enough just to still make money out of it, but I can tell you a lot of bands just had to cancel tours, and there was I think it was called the Animal Collective. They just cancelled their tour for the same reason. Literally couldn't see any financial sense in doing the tour. On paper, when we started doing like with the guarantees, we were going to make a loss. And we just drew more audience than we normally did, and we broke a lot of the we were really lucky. We sold out nearly most of our shows on the last couple of two European tours that we did. But on paper, it made no sense to do it at all. You were looking at it, and then the costing of fuel is just ridiculous. The tolls in France, you're talking about £100 sometimes to drive like 100 miles. They charge you like obscene prices. To even leave Ireland here, you're talking about €1,000 starting point just to get out of this, which is probably like similar to maybe $1,000. I'd say it's similar enough. So it's a lot of money just to get out of here. By the time before we even do our first show, say if we're playing in Amsterdam or somewhere like that, we've probably spent already $2,500 before we've even started, and you're just really hoping that your audience is going to come out and support you, buy the t-shirts, and then these venues are coming along taking percentage of our merchandise, and it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, like this is ridiculous. And then on our July tour, we were doing extremely well, and then the Spanish promoter rings us up. He said he's not going to give us, he's going to have to cut our guarantees in half, because while our concert's doing okay, all the other concerts that he's running is not doing okay, and he's not in the position to pay us anything. And we nearly lost that leg of our tour. So we ended up doing that for next to nothing, just to save face with the audience base. And somehow we just did enough on merchandise to kind of come out the other end and say, yeah, okay, at least everybody came home with some money. Everybody had something. It wasn't for nothing. And people are, you can't, like, for example, people in our band have to still do day jobs sometimes as well to break even. And this year has been quite difficult because Lloyd, our drummer's work arrangement has changed. So we had to kind of sometimes, to honor shows, drive there, drive all the way back home, 2 weeks later drive out the next weekend just to do all the shows. So we did a lot of that stuff this year. We had a festival in France called Motor Culture, which is like a big heavy kind of rock festival. But we just had to drive all the way there and all the way back just to do that gig, because we couldn't take the extra 5 shows around it because of work commitments. And it's like, you make no money doing that. It's literally, I think we lost money actually doing that festival, but it was still important to me to kind of do it for the right reasons, which is to build our name up and show the correct audience, the target audience, a little bit about what we do. But it's difficult, and I think touring for a lot of small bands, especially here in Ireland, they should be getting grants here to be able to have at least cut the ferry costs in bloody half to let musicians travel to that. And of course with Brexit in the UK, it's a right mess, because now you have to have a carnet, which basically means you have to take a bond out, so you're not going to sell your equipment in England. And what we found was the English are kind of fine. You get into England, they don't really hassle you for any kind of work visas or anything like that. But if you try to go from England into France, it's a disaster. This is where the French, literally, it's just no holds barred, turning English bands around with €500 fines and sending them back. And I just think that whole Brexit thing has really destroyed the English music industry. It's horrendous. And unfortunately for us, we can still get a boat to France, but that costs like €1,500. So that's kind of where we're at. Because taking a bond for $10,000 or something like that is not in my in the rec company's best interest, I don't think, or our own label's interest. So yeah, that's touring in 2022.
All right.
Sorry, I lost you there again.
No, it happens. So I gotta go to work, and it seems like the internet's telling us that we need to be done. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed chatting with you, and obviously I'll tag the band and whatever you may or may not see. But
I know.
it was good chatting with you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
John, thanks very much. What was the name of the band that you played in? What band do you play in? I'd be interested to check you guys out.
I don't play in a band anymore. I actually never really did. I like the band I joined was all because I was at a bar and they were playing metal music and I knew it. I didn't like it, but I knew it. And then I drank what would be my singer's pitcher of whiskey, Coke, at the bar we were at because he didn't want it, and I just slammed it on my way out. And then they were like, "Oh, you need to come hang out with us." So I joined the band. They literally had me play bass, and I found out I was playing with them an hour before they went on. They were like, "Come check us out. We're playing." And then the next thing you know, like I'm playing, and I remember the sound guy going, "How do you like your bass tone in the mix?" I was like, "Dude, I'm literally not lying to you. I don't know any of these songs. I don't know why the fuck they're doing this. I'm not going to turn my bass on at all. I'm going to fake it." And I remember like I said, I at least know the music enough. It was kind of generic metalcore. So I just kind of would keep an eye back on my drummer's feet, and I would just try to pretend to lock in with his thing and just kind of be like, okay, they're doing this. And then it's kind of hanging around for a minute. So something's about to come. And then it's a matter of just kind of visually paying attention to the two guitar players or the drummer of like when the beat's going to come back in and be like, okay, now you headbang or whatever. But the band name was called Enormosaurus, and I fucking hated that band name. I didn't like it. I was in a friend of mine's band that I grew up really enjoying as a couple years younger than him. That band was called Camilla. Most of the stuff we did that I was kind of working on them with was just a lot of basement recordings because we were trying to find basically a whole new band. So one day I would be playing guitar, another day I'd be playing bass. When we were trying out guitar players, we played like one show early in the morning. That was kind of like a trial run with a bunch of people, and it just kind of fell by the wayside. But I enjoy those, but those also were experiences where I learned that I think I would rather not play with people because I realized people are too finicky. Like the one band I was in, we never practiced ever, which is weird. And then I went from a band that's all we did was practiced, and we practiced the same songs over and over and over. We would practice 3 times a week, 4 hours a night, and never played a show. So I was just like, so by and large, I was like, this is kind of dumb. I don't even know, because of how old that was, and at the time it was, I don't even know if anything's like on anything because like those bands never did anything. But I enjoy playing music just for kind of myself at this point. I obviously have way too much gear for someone who will probably never play a show again. But I enjoy it. But it's not necessarily the either bands weren't really necessarily the style I would probably play if I were in my own band. But I think I'm in such a weird cross section of things that I don't even know what a band that if I were to write stuff, because I don't know what it'd sound like. But it's fun. I enjoy playing music, and I enjoy just the release of playing an instrument. But I think playing live, I don't like dealing with other people. Essentially, is what it boils down to, because it's too many egos, too many schedules you have to align with, and it's just a lot of work for not much reward, in my opinion, from the experiences of what I've done.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely tricky, getting musicians to kind of agree with each other, and yeah, it's an ongoing, process to try and keep everybody happy, and sometimes I prefer if I didn't play live. I've got hearing tinnitus problems at this point as well, so I kind of enjoy when I'm not touring as well. It kind of, but then I kind of feel the need to do it sometimes as well. So it's kind of one of those things. But yeah, as long as you're enjoying making music, that's the most important part. If you feel getting into a band takes that away, then playing in a band is not a good idea. For me, it's kind of a mixed thing. Sometimes it can get quite aggravating trying to get everybody on the same page, and sometimes it's rewarding when you do a really good concert and all the hard work paid off. I don't believe in doing too many rehearsals because I just think things can get worse sometimes. You get bored of the music as well. I think it's good to get on stage and be a little bit kind of unsure of yourself, just a little bit, not too much, but just enough that you know that you're going to have to focus and try hard tonight rather than come out and playing like you're bored stiff playing the stuff. And I just think over rehearsing also is not good for the morale of the band as well. Everybody's starting to it's too familiar with each other as well. So I do think it's always needs to be something on the horizon. There's a reason you're rehearsing. It's not just rehearsing for the sake of it. We did that during COVID times. We just rehearsed just to keep it going. But it was always with the idea that we'd hit the ground running when we came back, and we did. And then we had a few streaming kind of shows and different things to kind of, you know, make sense of it. But yeah, you never know. You can today. You don't need to play live even to make your own music. So you know that's a good and a bad thing, I guess. So we'll see. We'll see. Never say never. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I had to think about what time it was. The rest of your afternoon, and we'll do another one of these down the road.
For sure, John. Thanks very much for the interview. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So that was my conversation with Torsten, again, of God is an Astronaut. The beginning of the end, live 20-year anniversary release of their first record is out now. Go check it out. Compare them if you want to. I think it sounds good just on its own. It's an updated take on what they had already done. So if you were a fan of the band before, you still like this. I don't see why you wouldn't. Unless you're the person like I was talking about in the intro who's like, I can't grow and adapt with things, and in which case this is not for you. But really enjoyed this chat. I think it's also, when I got done with this, and it's funny because, I said I had to go to work, and then I showed up to work, and they were not expecting me. Apparently, when they changed my day for a training program thing, they did not change the time, so I showed up hours early. So I could have actually kept talking to Torsten about the things we were talking about at the end. So we'll save that for another time, though. But anyway, it was interesting kind of thinking about this chat after the fact and thinking about, just, I don't want to call it being complacent, but just really kind of, the thing I said at the end where I was like, with this show, I realized I've kind of gotten to a certain level with the show, and I can either be bummed that I'm not, a Joe Rogan, or I'm not on that path, or I can be like, I'm doing pretty good, all things considered. I don't spend money on advertising. I'm not someone famous. I'm not this. I'm not that. I've literally done it all DIY just on my own. And as far as I've taken it, has been pretty crazy. And I can look back and go, that's a fucking success. And I should be happy with where I've taken it. Do I want it to be more and grow? Of course. And I'm still working toward that. But I'm happy if it never gets beyond this, because it's still further than I ever thought I'd take it. And I think, that's something Torsten and I were able to talk about, and I think is really interesting, is just enjoying the ride and enjoying the successes that you can look back on or even enjoy in real time, versus constantly being upset about the breaks you didn't get or the things that didn't happen or may never happen. Just enjoy being right now. Enjoy it, because it's the only time you're going to be in the right now. I constantly see, and I guess this is a byproduct of working in a bar and working in service industries and now literally seeing 20-somethings talk about things and 30-somethings and 40-somethings and 50-somethings and all the way down the line. I constantly hear people like, well, I didn't get this, or, I whatever, or they'll talk about the past or the future. And being literally in the presence of right now, listening to people talk, I just constantly go, well, I'm sure when you were blank, you wanted this, or whatever. Why don't we focus on our successes and the positives in our life? All we do is we never enjoy the moment, ever. We're always looking for the next thing. And I think that that's so weird that we never take a step back as people typically and enjoy the thing we're doing in the moment. I mean, to put it back onto the show and myself, if I were to ever compare myself to another show and be like, well, fuck, they got so-and-so and I didn't, it's like, okay, but there would have been a point I would have been stoked with whomever I've had on the show. Why don't I look at all the people I never would have thought I would have gotten on the show and be happy about that? Why not look at that as a victory instead of a defeat because of someone I didn't get? I don't know. it's honestly something I've been thinking a lot about since this conversation, is just being happy with what you have and not being upset about something you don't have. I don't know. I don't really know how to put it any other way without beating a dead horse. So I guess it's time to start wrapping up this episode. If you would like to keep up with God is an Astronaut, you can find them at Facebook at GodIAA, Instagram at GIAA_band. Same with on Twitter, or just go to godisanastronaut.com. Hopefully we'll see the guys coming through in the next year or two, celebrating this release and so much more. Just basically celebrating their career. I mean, 20 fucking years. You can sit there and say, well, we never did this, we never did that. But you know what? You're still here 20 years later and people still give a fuck. So to me, that is a success. I hope potentially I'm still doing this maybe in 20 years. Who knows? We're approaching 6 years in about a month. I didn't think I'd make it 6 years. So again, just be appreciative of what you have and the body of work that you have put out. Be appreciative. God damn it. That is the key to this episode. Be appreciative. Also, I would like to say you could follow Torsten, but you cannot. You heard all of that at the end. And if you'd like to keep up with the podcast, simple enough, follow us at BrewspeakPod on all your social media platforms. You can email us at brutallyspeaking@gmail.com with guest suggestions or comments or whatever. If you would like to support the show, you can head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/BrewspeakPod. Speaking of support our sponsors for supporting us. Rockabilia.com, head on over there, use our code Brutally, get 10% off your total purchase order. You know, it's funny, I always say they have over 500,000 items in their online store. I know as of when I'm recording this, Frankie and the guys are down in Pennsylvania right now, and they are finishing acquiring an entire store's worth of inventory. So I know I always say there's probably something, but at this point, I think Frankie had told me they got 600 pallets, I think, question marks, of new items to put in their online store. So if you didn't think between 500,000 items being something that there would be something you would want to see, I guarantee it that there will be something that you will at least be like, I want that. So go over to Rockabilia, go check out what they have. I'm sure they're going to be updating constantly from here on out with all kinds of new stuff that they just acquired. In addition to all the stuff they have coming up, there is some stuff coming up that Frankie told me about that I think is really fucking cool, and I know will sell very well. So keep an eye out over there, and if you use our code Brutally at checkout, we'll give you 10% off extra. So we're saving you money, and the holidays are coming up, so I know you need to save some money. So go support them for supporting us. Lastly, starvingartistbrewing.com. Go check them out. You can go to starvingartist.beer, go see what they have. Unfortunately, they don't have a distribution beyond Michigan currently, so you'll have to come here to Michigan and find out why I love our state and why I love our state's beers and breweries so much. I think we genuinely have something that is unique compared to anywhere else I've ever gone in the U.S. so far. If you doubt me, please email me. Let me know some places I need to go, because the wife and I do love to travel, and breweries and so forth are something else that we do enjoy going to. So drop me a line. Let me know. But I also love Starving Artists, because not only do they sponsor the show, not only do they give me some beer as well, not only is there something else beer related that I'm not going to bring up just yet, but the fact that, you know, with the Beer Minute, they let us put the shine on other breweries, not just here in Michigan, but all over. And I love that inclusivity and the fact that they aren't like, well, fuck it, you have to push us. You know, like they say, judge beer, not people. And I love judging beer, and I don't like judging people. So without further ado, this is it for the podcast. I will see you next time with Tuck from Fit for a King. That was a really good chat. I can't wait to get that one out to you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, your week, whatever it is, and I'll see you next time.